The Alpha King had hunted 3 wolves tonight to keep her alive. Talia didn't know that, of course. She only knew the shame that had driven her into the Black Pine Forest, away from tomorrow's lunar council, away from her family's desperate hopes and her own broken body. She definitely didn't know that the Alpha King was crouched in the shadows 30 feet away, his hands still wet with rogue blood, watching her sleep like she was something precious he had no right to touch. He'd been watching her for 19 nights now. 19 nights of telling himself tomorrow he'd step out of the shadows and tell her the truth, that she was powerful beyond measure, that she was everything he'd been waiting for. By morning, he'd have no choice. The Black Pine had a reputation for swallowing wolves whole, but Talia had been coming here since she was 16, since the night her wolf tried to emerge and got stuck. She'd never forget being trapped like that, bones breaking wrong, fur sprouting in, uneven patches, her body a twisted thing that made the others step back in horror. She'd found peace in these ancient trees when her own pack started leaving her behind, when the full moon runs happened without her, when the pack healer had examined her for the 3rd time, then the 4th, and finally looked at her mother and said, "There's nothing I can do." But tonight, she'd come here because tomorrow was simply impossible. Tomorrow, every unmated wolf in the territory would stand in the council hall while visiting alphas looked them over, deciding who to claim. Her mother had spent months preparing, coaching Talia on how to stand, what to say, how to compensate for what she lacked. Her sister Irina had bought her a dress, pale blue silk that hung on Talia like a lie. "Just don't shift," Irina had said, squeezing her hand. "Be charming. Smile. Maybe someone won't care that you can't." Irina hadn't finished the sentence. She hadn't needed to. Maybe someone won't care that you're broken. So Talia had written a cowardly note, "I'm sorry, I can't," and walked into the forest instead, to her clearing, to the one place she didn't have to be ashamed of what she was. She'd spread her bedroll under the stars, and finally let herself breathe. Let herself stop pretending the weight of her family's disappointment wasn't crushing her. Stop pretending she didn't see the pity in her father's eyes every time she excused herself from pack runs. The shame lived in her bones now, heavy and familiar. She didn't notice the silver petal flowers blooming around her clearing, their white petals catching moonlight. Didn't smell the sweet, drowsy scent they released. She just thought she was finally, blessedly tired as her eyes grew heavy. In the trees, Trent had gone rigid the moment he'd spotted the flowers. He'd dropped down from the oak tree in absolute silence, every instinct roaring. Silver petal only bloomed under a full moon, and only when planted deliberately. They were a hunter's tool, a trap. He'd scanned the forest and saw them, 3 shapes moving through the darkness toward the clearing, toward her. Trent attacked them quietly, efficiently. The first rogue died with his hand over her mouth, the second with a snapped neck before she could shift. The third had been faster, had nearly howled out, but Trent's wolf was older, stronger, and absolutely determined that nothing would touch the sleeping woman in that clearing. Now he stood at the edge of the tree line, 3 bodies limp behind him, watching Talia sleep. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. She'd rolled onto her side, one hand tucked under her cheek. Her dark hair had escaped its braid, falling across her face. She looked young like this, vulnerable. The mate bond he'd been feeling for weeks pulled taut in his chest, and Trent pressed his palm against his sternum like he could push it back down. He knew he shouldn't be here. Shouldn't have been watching her from the shadows, learning the way she talked to the trees when she thought no one could hear, the way she called moonlight to her palms and scattered it like starlight, the way she looked at the forest with wonder instead of fear. He'd first told himself he was investigating a potential threat. His scouts had reported strange magic in the Black Pine, power that smelled like the old bloodlines, like the kind of magic that had been buried for good reason. But 19 nights ago, he'd found her instead. Found her sitting in this very clearing with tears streaming down her face, whispering, "What's wrong with me?" to the empty forest. His wolf had decided in that moment, had reached across whatever distance separated them, and said mine with such certainty that Trent had actually staggered. It should have been impossible. His bloodline didn't bond with wild magic. His father would have called it corruption. His pack would call it treason. And she couldn't even feel it yet, couldn't feel the bond trying to snap into place between them, because her wolf was trapped, locked away by magic she didn't understand, protecting her from a power that would burn through her if it released all at once. Trent knew what she was, had figured it out by the third night of watching her. The healer who'd examined her at 16 had been right to be afraid, but Talia had no idea. She just thought she was broken. Behind him, a twig snapped. Trent spun, a growl building in his chest, but stopped when he recognized the scent. His head sentinel, Rowan, stepped out of the shadows with his hands raised. "Easy. It's me." "What are you doing here?" "Following you." Rowan's gaze flicked to Talia, then to the dead rogues behind Trent. "You killed them?" "They planted Silver Petal. They were coming for her." "So the reports were true. She's Dreamweaver bloodline." Trent's wolf snarled at the clinical assessment in Rowan's voice, and his friend took a careful step back. "Wait, she's your mate," Rowan said, understanding dawning. "That's why you've been disappearing every night, why you've been impossible for weeks." Trent said nothing. "Does she know?" "She does not." "Trent, she can't feel it yet. Her wolf is locked away." He turned back to watch her sleep, his jaw tight. "If I tell her now, it's just another chain, another expectation she can't meet, another way for her to feel like she's failing." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "The Lunar Council is tomorrow." "I know. She'll be there. Every unmated alpha in the territory will—" "I know." His words came out hard, dangerous. "You can't just watch her forever, Trent." "I'm not watching her." Trent's hands curled into fists. "I'm keeping her alive. There are more rogues. They've been hunting her bloodline for generations. She's the first Dreamweaver to manifest in a century, and they need her for something. A ritual, maybe. Something that requires old magic." "Then tell her. Warn her." "And say what? That I've been stalking her for 3 weeks? That she's magically bonded to me and doesn't know it? That she's descended from a bloodline everyone thinks is extinct? And by the way, people want to kill her for it?" Trent shook his head. "She already thinks she's cursed, Rowan. She already carries so much shame. I won't add to that weight." "So you'll just keep killing rogues in the shadows?" "Yes." Rowan studied him, and something like sympathy crossed his face. "You're in love with her?" Trent didn't answer. Couldn't. Because it wasn't love yet. How could it be when they'd never spoken? But he knew things about her that felt more intimate than conversation. Knew the catch in her breath before she cried. Knew she whispered apologies to the forest when she felt like a burden on the world. Knew that if someone hurt her, he'd make them regret being born. Whatever this was, it was already too late to walk away. "Help me move her," Trent said finally. "Away from the Silver Petal. And then I need you to track the rogue's trail. Find out where they came from." Together, they approached the clearing. Trent knelt beside Talia, and up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes. Her brow was furrowed even in sleep, carrying burdens into her dreams. A tear had dried on her cheek. His chest ached. Carefully, so carefully, he slid his arms under her and lifted. She was lighter than he expected, and she curled into his chest instinctively, seeking warmth. The mate bond sang. He carried her 20 yards to a safer spot, away from the flowers, and laid her on her bedroll. She murmured something in her sleep, a name he didn't recognize, and turned onto her side again. Trent removed his cloak and draped it over her shoulders. She'd be cold before morning. "You're going to stay here all night, aren't you?" Rowan said from behind him. "Go. Track them." "Trent, I'll see you at dawn." Rowan sighed but didn't argue. He disappeared into the trees, and Trent was alone again with the sleeping woman who was unraveling his entire existence. He settled against a tree at the edge of her new campsite, far enough that she wouldn't see him if she woke, but close enough that nothing could reach her without going through him first. The night stretched long and cold. Trent didn't sleep. He watched Talia dream, watched the moonlight paint silver across her skin, and tried not to think about tomorrow, about the council, about all the ways this could go wrong. Around 3 a.m, she started shivering. The cloak wasn't enough. Trent moved closer, carefully adjusting her blanket around her, and when his hand accidentally brushed her shoulder, her shivering stopped. The mate bond hummed with satisfaction. He pulled back quickly, his heart pounding. Not yet. She's not ready. But his wolf disagreed. His wolf wanted to curl around her, wanted to wake her and tell her she was safe, wanted her to know. But she wasn't ready. Not for the bond, not for the truth, not for him. So Trent did the harder thing. He pulled back, returned to his tree, and kept watching, kept protecting her from threats she didn't know existed yet, including himself. Just before dawn, Talia's eyes moved beneath her lids, dreaming, and she whispered, "Please, I just want to be normal." Trent's jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. "You're not broken," he thought fiercely. "You're everything." But he stayed silent in the shadows, and when the sun finally rose and Talia began to stir, Trent slipped away into the forest like a ghost. She'd never know he'd been there. Talia woke to birdsong and shame. The shame came first, always. That heavy, familiar weight that said you ran, you coward, you left your family to deal with your mess. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, and froze. She wasn't where she'd fallen asleep. The flowers, she distinctly remembered falling asleep surrounded by flowers, were gone. She was 20 yards from her original spot, and there was a cloak draped over her shoulders that definitely wasn't hers. A man's cloak. Heavy wool lined with fur, worn soft from use, smelling like pine and something else. Something wild and dark that made her broken wolf stir for the first time in days, pressing against the walls of her consciousness like it recognized something important. Talia's heart began to pound. Someone had moved her. Someone had covered her. She stood quickly, scanning the forest, but there was nothing. No tracks, no signs, just the cloak in the quiet morning, followed by the inescapable knowledge that she hadn't been alone. Her hands shook as she picked up the cloak, studying it. It was well made, expensive, not something a rogue would wear, and the way it had been draped over her, carefully, almost tenderly, didn't feel like a threat. It felt like protection. "Hello?" Her voice cracked on the word. "Is someone there?" Silence. Talia clutched the cloak to her chest, her mind racing. She should be terrified, should run, but instead she felt safe. Like whoever had been here had meant her no harm. Her chest tightened with something that felt dangerously close to longing. Someone had cared whether she was cold. Someone had made sure she wasn't alone. She folded the cloak carefully, her fingers lingering on the soft wool, and tried to remember last night. She'd been so tired, bone-deep tired, and those white flowers everywhere had smelled so sweet. Her blood went cold. Those were silver petal flowers. Talia's gaze snapped to where she'd fallen asleep. The flowers were gone now, wilted back into the earth as they always did after a full moon, but she remembered them clearly. White petals catching moonlight, dozens of them circling her bedroll. She hadn't questioned them last night. The scent had been so sweet, so drowsy, pulling her under before suspicion could form. Because that's what silver petal did. Made you careless, made you sleep. Silver petal was a sedative, yes, but it was also a hunter's tool. Rogues used it to trap prey. She spun in a slow circle, her wolf nearly pushing to the surface, alert. Had someone been hunting her? Had someone else stopped them? "Thank you," she said to the empty forest, feeling foolish but needing to say it anyway. "Whoever you are, thank you." The trees whispered in the morning breeze, keeping their secrets. Talia packed her bedroll with shaking hands, trying to ignore the part of her that wanted to stay, wanted to wait and see if her mysterious protector would reveal themselves. But the sun was rising, and she had to face what she'd run from. She had to go home. The walk back took an hour, and with every step, the shame grew heavier. Her family would be frantic. Her mother would be crying. Irina would look at her with those sad, understanding eyes that somehow made everything worse. When she finally emerged from the forest onto her pack's territory, she found them waiting. Her father stood on the front porch, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Her mother sat on the steps, her eyes red-rimmed. And Irina, sweet, perfect Irina, with her flawless wolf and her easy shifts, stood between them, wringing her hands. "Talia," her father said, and the disappointment in his voice felt sharp as a knife. "I'm sorry." Her words tumbled out. "I'm so sorry. I just couldn't." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her mother stood, her voice shaking. "The council starts in 3 hours. 3 hours, Talia. The Alpha King himself is attending, and you were going to just... What? Hide in the forest forever? The Alpha King. Trent Halloran." Talia had never seen him. He rarely left his fortress, but everyone knew the stories. They said he'd ended a border war by executing every Alpha involved, guilty and innocent alike, and displayed their heads as a warning. Said he took counsel from no one, showed mercy to nothing, and hadn't smiled in a decade. Unmated by choice because he'd supposedly told the council that wolves were beneath him, that he'd rather rule alone than shackle himself to someone weak. Talia had always thought he sounded more monster than man. "I left a note," Talia said weakly. Her father's jaw tightened. "Talia, this was our chance. Your chance. We're not a powerful family. We don't have alliances or resources, but we have you and your sister, and if one of you could make a good match. I can't shift, Dad." The words came out harder than she meant them to. "I can't shift, and everyone knows it. What Alpha would want that?" "One who sees past it," Irina said softly, stepping forward. "One who sees how smart you are, how kind." "I'm broken," Talia's voice cracked. "Stop pretending I'm not." "You're not broken," her mother said, but there was a hesitation in her voice that Talia had learned to hear, a tiny pause that said, "But what if you are?" Silence fell between them, heavy and familiar. "Get dressed," her father said finally. "We leave in 2 hours. Dad, you will attend the council, Talia. You will smile, and you will try. We've sacrificed too much for you to give up now." The words hit like a blow. Sacrificed. Yes, they really had. Her father had turned down a promotion that would have required relocating because Talia couldn't handle integrating into a new pack. Her mother had spent countless nights researching healers, spending money they didn't have. Irina had put off her own mating prospects to help Talia. They'd all sacrificed, and Talia had given them nothing in return. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll go." Her mother's shoulders sagged with relief. Irina squeezed her hand. Her father just nodded and went inside, like he couldn't bear to look at her anymore. Talia stood on the porch, clutching the mysterious cloak she still hadn't mentioned, and tried not to cry. The council hall was worse than she'd imagined. It was a massive stone building in neutral territory, decorated with territorial banners and filled with wolves from every pack in the region. The unmated wolves stood in a long line against one wall, while the visiting alphas circulated, talking, evaluating. Talia wanted to throw up. She wore the blue silk dress Irina had bought, her hair braided and pinned. She looked like she belonged here, like she was whole. The lie of it made her skin crawl. "Just breathe," Irina whispered beside her. "It'll be over soon." But it wouldn't. There were at least 50 alphas circulating through the hall, all of them searching for mates, all of them expecting things Talia couldn't give. Strength, a flawless shift, power that didn't feel like a curse. Talia fixed her gaze on the far wall and tried to make herself invisible. For 20 minutes, it worked. Then the temperature in the room suddenly changed. Conversations died mid-sentence. Wolves who'd been laughing went still. The air itself seemed to compress, like the building was holding its breath. Talia's eyes snapped to the entrance. Trent. Halloran stood in the doorway. He didn't announce himself. Didn't need to. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Ancient. Absolute. Undeniable. He was taller than she'd imagined, broader through the shoulders, his dark hair slightly too long and his jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore simple clothes, all black, but on him they looked like armor, and his eyes, gold brown and burning, swept the room with the assessment of an apex predator, deciding what was worth killing. His eyes passed over Talia, and for one heartbeat, she could have sworn they stopped. Then he turned away, and Talia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That's him," Irina breathed. "This is the first one he's attended in years. He must be looking for someone specific." Talia didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because when those golden eyes locked onto hers, something in her chest snapped taut like a rope pulled to breaking. Heat flooded her veins. Foreign, overwhelming, yet impossibly right. Her wolf, dormant and trapped for 4 years, suddenly surged against her ribs with enough force to steal her breath. Not the weak, painful stirring she'd learned to dread. This was power. This was desperate recognition. She didn't have time to figure it out. The presentations were starting, and one by one, unmated wolves stepped forward to be introduced. Talia's turn came too soon. "Talia Wrenwood," the announcer called. "Black Pine Pack, daughter of—" She stepped forward, her heart pounding, and tried to smile. Tried to look like she wasn't dying inside. The alphas looked at her with varying degrees of interest. Some nodded politely. Some turned away immediately. One, a scarred male from the southern packs, studied her intently in a way that made her skin crawl. And Trent Halloran. She couldn't see him. He'd moved to the back of the room, partially hidden by a stone column. And then it was over. Talia returned to the line, shaking. Irina grabbed her hand. "You did great." She hadn't. She'd stood there like a scared rabbit, and everyone had seen it. The presentations continued. More wolves, more evaluations. Talia stopped paying attention, lost in her own misery. Suddenly a scream erupted. The sound cut through the hall like a blade, and chaos erupted. Wolves were pouring in through the side doors. Rogues, their eyes wild, their intent clear. They weren't here for the council. They were here for something specific, for someone specific. "Dreamweaver," one of them shouted, scanning the crowd. "Where's the Dreamweaver?" Talia's blood went cold. They were here for her. She didn't understand how they knew, didn't understand what they wanted, but when the lead rogue's eyes locked on her, she saw her death in them. "There!" He lunged for her. Time fractured. Talia saw Irina's face contort with horror, saw her father shoving through the crowd, too far, too slow, saw the rogue's claws, black and curved and reaching for her throat, saw his jaws open, teeth meant to tear. Her wolf battered uselessly against her locked consciousness. Her body refused to shift, refused to fight, refused to save itself. She was going to die in a blue silk dress, surrounded by strangers, until something massive collided with the rogue mid-flight. Trent crossed 30 feet in the space between heartbeats, and now he stood between Talia and certain death, his body coiled with lethal grace, his eyes promising murder. "Touch her," he said, his voice deadly calm, "and I'll scatter your pack across 6 territories." The rogues hesitated. Even feral, even desperate, they recognized a superior predator. But there were 8 of them, and desperation made wolves stupid. They attacked as one. Trent shifted, a massive dark wolf with gold eyes, and the fight was brutal and brief. He tore through them with surgical precision, his wolf ancient and unstoppable. Within minutes, 6 rogues lay scattered across the stone floor, bodies crumpled and motionless. The remaining 2 ran. The hall was now dead silent. Trent shifted back to human form, breathing hard, blood on his hands. His eyes found Talia through the chaos, and the look on his face made her knees buckle. In this moment, he wasn't the cold, ruthless alpha king everyone feared. He looked desperate, maybe even terrified. The pieces clicked together in her mind. "You," she whispered. "It was you, in the forest." Something flickered across his face, caught, cornered, before his jaw tightened. "The cloak! You moved me! Have you been watching me?" Around them, the council wolves were staring, murmuring. Talia's parents looked terrified. Irina's mouth hung open, and the scarred alpha from earlier was watching with calculating eyes. "We need to talk," Trent said quietly. "Somewhere private." "Why?" Talia's voice shook, but she held her ground. "Why were you watching me? Why did those rogues call me Dreamweaver?" "Not here." "Yes, here." She was shaking now, fear and confusion and something else, warring inside her. "Everyone already heard. Everyone knows something's wrong with me. So just tell me. What am I?" Trent looked at her for a long moment, something like pain crossing his face. "You're not broken," he said finally. "You're descended from the most powerful bloodline in wolf history, the Dreamweavers. They could bend reality itself, and they were hunted to extinction because of it." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "Your wolf isn't trapped because you're weak. It's trapped because you're too strong, and your body is protecting you from power that could burn you alive if it released all at once." The ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. "That's impossible." "It's true. The healer who examined you at 16 knew. That's why she was afraid." Trent's golden eyes were intense, almost desperate. "You're the first Dreamweaver to manifest in over a century, and there are people who want to use your power. That's why the rogues came. That's why I've been watching you. To keep you safe." The room spun in her blurred vision. Talia grabbed the wall for support. "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Trent's expression shuddered, and she saw him retreat behind walls she suddenly wanted to tear down. "Because it's my responsibility. You're in my territory." His words were steady, but his body told a different story. Jaw clenched hard enough to ache, shoulders rigid, stance protective in a way that had nothing to do with protocol. He'd positioned himself between her and the rest of the world, like his body had decided for him. And he kept looking at her. Quick, hungry glances that lingered too long, cataloging every breath, every heartbeat, making absolutely certain she was safe. This wasn't responsibility. This was need. Before Talia could push further, the scarred alpha stepped forward. "Interesting," he said, his voice oily. "A dreamweaver. I thought your predecessors eliminated that bloodline 2 centuries ago, Halloran. Seems they missed one." Trent's wolf flashed in his eyes. "Careful, Vex." "Oh, I'm always careful." Vex smiled, showing too many teeth. "The question is, what will you do with her? Dreamweaver magic is valuable but dangerous in the wrong hands. Perhaps she should be contained, for everyone's safety." "She's not a threat." "Isn't she? That kind of power, untrained, unstable." Vex's eyes slid to Talia. "How do we know she's not already being influenced by forces beyond her control?" "That's not how it works," Trent said through gritted teeth. "Then explain to the council how it does work. Explain why we shouldn't be concerned about an active Dreamweaver bloodline with no training, no control, and apparently no idea of what she is." Vex spread his hands. "I'm not saying anything should happen to the girl. I'm just saying safeguards for everyone." Murmurs rippled through the hall. She heard the agreement in their voices. The fear. Talia's world narrowed to a single truth. She wasn't just broken. She was dangerous. A threat that needed containing. "No." Trent's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "She's under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me." "Your protection?" Vex's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a claim, Alpha King. On what grounds?" Trent's jaw clenched. For a long moment he said nothing, and Talia could see the war in his eyes, calculation versus something deeper, something that looked almost like fear. Then his gaze locked onto hers, and she saw it. The truth he'd been guarding for 19 nights, the reason he'd killed for her. "She's my mate." His declaration echoed through the stone hall. Talia stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "No," she whispered. "That's not... I can't feel... You can't feel it because your wolf is trapped." Trent's voice was raw in a way that made her chest crack. "But I felt it since the first night I saw you in the Black Pine. Felt it pulling me back every night since." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "I didn't tell you because you already carried enough weight, but I can't hide it anymore. Not if it keeps you safe." The room spun. Her mate. She had a mate? The thing every wolf dreamed of. And she couldn't even feel the bond. Of course. The cruelty of it stole her breath. Finally something right, something good, something hers, and even this her broken wolf denied her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She didn't know who she was apologizing to. Him, herself, fate. I need to." She turned and ran. Behind her, she heard Trent call her name, heard the commotion as he tried to follow, but she was already out the door, already running for the only place she'd ever felt safe. The black pine swallowed her whole, and Talia ran deeper, ran until her lungs screamed and her legs buckled, ran until she collapsed in her clearing. Only then did she let herself break. She pressed her forehead to the moss and dragged in, ragged breaths, trying to hold the pieces of herself together. Her hands dug into the earth to anchor herself to something solid, something real. A mate. She had a mate who'd protected her from the shadows, who'd killed for her, who'd looked at her like she mattered, yet she couldn't feel him, couldn't feel the bond that was supposed to make her whole, couldn't access the power everyone said she had, couldn't even shift properly without 4 years of shame weighing her down. A twig snapped behind her. Talia whirled, her heart in her throat, but it was only Trent. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his hands raised, his expression careful. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have announced it like that. I should have told you privately. Talia's voice cracked. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady herself. 19 nights. You were there for 19 nights while I thought I was alone, while I cried and told the trees I was worthless. Talia!" She dropped her hands, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm trying to understand. You felt the bond, and you didn't say anything. Why?" "Because you already believed you weren't enough. I couldn't—" Trent's hands flexed at his sides. "I couldn't add the weight of a mate bond to that. Couldn't make you feel like you'd failed at one more thing when you couldn't feel what I felt." The words hit her chest like a blow. "You thought I'd see it as another failure," she whispered. "You carry so much." His voice dropped, rough with frustration. "Every moment your wolf doesn't surface, every time the magic doesn't behave, you think it means you're not enough. And I couldn't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I couldn't stand the thought of being one more weight on your shoulders, one more thing you'd blame yourself for not being ready for." Talia's breath shuddered out. He wasn't wrong. "So you just stayed in the shadows, kept me safe without me knowing?" "Yes, but today, they came for you in public. I couldn't hide anymore, not when hiding meant losing you." She stared at him, really looked at him for the first time since he'd appeared in her clearing. He was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. All sharp angles and restrained power, gold-brown eyes that burned hot enough to make her skin prickle. Blood-streaked and wild, he should have looked feral. Instead, he looked like a god who'd stepped down from his pedestal, and he was standing in front of her with his shoulders rigid, hands clenched white-knuckled at his sides, jaw so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, braced for her to run, for her to reject him. The realization stole her breath. He wasn't afraid of the rogues hunting her, wasn't afraid of the fights coming or the threats circling. He was afraid of her, afraid she'd look at him, at this bond he'd been carrying alone for 19 nights, and decide it wasn't worth it, that he wasn't worth it. The weight of it settled in her chest, tender and terrifying. They stared at each other across the clearing, the space between them charged with longing and fear. "I felt something," Talia said softly, and watched surprise flash across Trent's face. "When you walked into that hall, just a flicker, but—" She pressed her hand to her chest. "My wolf woke up. For the first time, I think she tried to reach the surface." Trent went very still. "You felt it?" "I didn't know what it was then. Thought maybe I was imagining it." Her expression softened, something almost hopeful flickering in her eyes. "But it was real, wasn't it? The bond?" "Yes." The word came out rough, like he'd been holding his breath. "Your wolf recognized me even though she's locked away. I didn't think—" He stopped, shook his head. "I didn't think you'd feel anything yet." Talia nodded slowly, processing. "So it's there. I just can't access it fully. Not yet. Your wolf is protecting you from more power than your body can handle. Right now." He took a step closer. "It's not your fault, Talia. None of this is your fault. I know that up here." She tapped her temple. But knowing doesn't make it feel true. I lived 4 years as the girl who couldn't shift, who sat through every moon ceremony alone while everyone else ran. Her throat tightened. You don't just wake up one day and stop being ashamed of that, even if the reason changed. You don't. Not all at once. Trent was closer now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. But you can start by believing me when I tell you that you're not weak. I ran, she said simply. From the ceremony, from the hall just now. I keep running from my problems. You survive. His voice was fierce. You survived being different in a world that demands conformity. You carried shame that wasn't yours with more grace than most wolves could manage. You kept going when everything in you wanted to stop. That's not weakness, Talia. That's strength. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. I'm sorry, she whispered. Trent's brow furrowed gently. For what? For running away. She gestured helplessly. You've been protecting me. You killed for me, and I ran away the moment you told everyone the truth. Her voice dropped. I'm scared. Of this. Of you. Of being someone's mate when I can barely feel the bond. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears and something that looked like wonder. But mostly I'm scared because I don't understand why fate would give someone like you. Someone like me. You could have anyone. You're the Alpha King. And I'm just... Trent's hand came up slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears. You're exactly what I need. You see the world like it's full of magic, he said quietly. I've been king for 10 years, Talia. A decade of blood and politics and wolves who only see the crown. I forgot what it felt like to want something that wasn't about strategy or survival. Then I found you in this clearing, talking to the trees like they could hear you, calling moonlight to your palms just to watch it dance. And I realized I'd been holding my breath for years. His hand brushed her cheek again, and the touch sent heat racing through her. You made me remember what it feels like to be more than a title, more than feared. His voice dropped, rough and honest. You made me want to be the kind of man who deserves someone who still believes in wonder. Her breath caught. You saw me at my worst. I watched you be human, be vulnerable, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Let's figure this out together, Talia. His words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Talia's breath caught. His hands were warm on her face, and she could feel his heartbeat through the air between them, fast, unsteady, matching hers. Somehow, this powerful, feared Alpha King was nervous. Because of her. Together? The word came out barely audible. If you'll have me. His voice was rough, raw. Her answer was to lean into his touch, just slightly, just enough. His pupils dilated, and the heat in his gaze made her skin flush. She watched his eyes drop to her mouth, watched the war play across his face, restraint versus want. Talia, he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a plea. She tilted her face up, and whatever control he'd been clinging to shattered. He leaned in, his breath ghosting across her lips, one hand sliding into her hair while the other tightened on her waist, pulling her closer, until a howl split the night, then another, and another. Trent's head snapped up, his body going rigid. What is it? They're coming, all of them. He pulled her toward him, his arms coming around her protectively. The rogues. They've called a pack. Talia's heart stopped. How many? Too many. Trent's wolf flashed in his eyes. We need to move, now. But before they could run, wolves poured into the clearing from all sides, 20 of them, 30. More. They formed a circle around Talia and Trent, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, and at the front stood a woman Talia had never seen before. She was older, her hair silver, her face marked with ritual scars. "Alpha King," the woman said, her voice cold. "Step aside. The Dreamweaver comes with us." "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged." The woman's lips curved into a wicked smile. "But it doesn't have to be. Give us the girl, and we'll let you walk away. She's no good to you anyway. Can't even shift properly." Talia felt Trent's arms tighten around her. "She's my mate," he said, his voice deadly. "I'll die before I let you take her." How noble. How foolish. The woman's eyes slid to Talia. "Did he tell you why we want you, little Dreamweaver? Did he explain what your blood can do?" "Don't listen to her," Trent said. "There's a seal in the old territory, a lock placed by your ancestors 200 years ago, trapping magic that could reshape the world." The woman took a step forward. "Your blood is the key. One cut, one ritual, and everything changes. We could bring back the old ways, the true power." "You could tear reality apart," Trent growled. "That magic was sealed for a reason. By cowards who feared their own strength." The woman's gaze never left Talia. "You feel it, don't you? The power locked inside you, clawing to get out. They told you it was wrong, that you were broken, but you're not. You're magnificent. Let us help you. Let us teach you what you really are." For one terrible moment, Talia was tempted to finally understand, to not be broken anymore, to be powerful instead of ashamed. Then she felt Trent's chest rise and fall against her back, steady, protective, felt the strength in the arms wrapped around her, the way his body had positioned itself between her and every threat without hesitation. She tilted her head back to look at him. His eyes found hers immediately, gold brown and fierce and utterly certain. There was no doubt in his gaze, no hesitation, just an intensity that made her breath catch, a promise that said, "I will stand between you and the world if that's what it takes." And beneath that fierceness, something softer. He looked at her like she mattered, like the woman who talked to trees and couldn't shift properly was someone worth protecting, worth wanting, worth 19 nights of silent vigil. "No," Talia said. The woman's smile faded. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Talia's voice grew stronger. "I don't know what I am yet. Maybe I am powerful. Maybe I'm everything you say. But I'm not a key for your ritual. I'm not a tool for anyone." "Foolish girl." The woman's face twisted with anger. "You have no idea what you're refusing, what you could become." "Maybe not, but I know what I won't become." Talia straightened, and something in her chest pulled tight. "I won't become someone who hurts people for power." The high woman's eyes flashed. "Then you'll die with your pathetic mate. Take them!" The rogues lunged as one, a wall of teeth and claws and killing intent. Trent shifted mid-breath, his massive dark wolf erupting between Talia and certain death. He met the first wave with savage precision, jaws closing around a throat, claws tearing through flesh. But for every rogue that fell, 2 more took its place. There were too many. Even an Alpha King couldn't fight 40 alone. Talia watched a rogue's claws rake across Trent's shoulder, watched blood streak through his dark fur, watched him stagger but keep fighting, keep standing between her and the pack that wanted her blood. His wolf snarled defiance even as 3 rogues dragged him down. "He's going to die. He's going to die protecting you because you're too weak, too broken. No." The word echoed through her mind like thunder. She wasn't weak, wasn't broken. She'd believed the lie for so long, let shame convince her she was less than whole. But Trent had seen the truth, had looked at her, really seen her, and decided she was worth dying for. If he believed that, maybe it was time she did too. The power inside her responded to her fury, to her fear, to the desperate need to save him. It had been waiting, coiled like a spring. "Let me out," her wolf whispered from the depths where she'd been trapped. "Let me help him." "I don't know how," Talia said aloud. "Yes, you do. You've always known. You were just afraid." She was afraid, absolutely terrified. But Trent's blood was staining the moss dark, and he was still fighting, still snarling, still refusing to let them reach her even as his legs buckled. Talia closed her eyes and reached deep, deeper than she'd ever dared, past the shame and the doubt and the years of believing she was cursed. She reached for that locked part of herself and threw open the door. Power exploded through her. It burned. It ached, ripped through every cell, every nerve, rewriting her from the inside out. It felt like dying and being reborn simultaneously, and Talia screamed as her body finally let her wolf free. Her wolf didn't just emerge. She erupted, bursting free like something wild and ancient that had been caged too long. When Talia opened her eyes, the world had transformed. She stood on 4 legs, and she was magnificent. Silver white fur rippled across her massive frame. Power crackled around her in visible waves, distorting the air, making the trees sway. The ground beneath her paws scorched. The rogues froze, staring at her. Even Trent stopped fighting, his golden eyes wide with reverence. Talia's wolf felt different, felt ancient, yet new and powerful beyond measure. She could feel the forest breathing around her, could sense the life in every tree, could feel the very fabric of reality humming at her fingertips. This was what she was meant to be. The woman's face had gone pale. "Impossible. No one shifts like that on their first time. No one." Talia's wolfum snarled, and the sound resonated with power that made the trees shake. "Stay away from my mate." Talia moved, and it felt like flying. She was beside Trent in an instant, putting herself between him and the rogues, and the bond. The bond hit her like lightning, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. It flooded through her in waves of molten gold, Trent's shock, his fierce pride, his overwhelming relief. She felt his love like a physical thing, warm and certain and devastating in its intensity. The bond had been there all along, a golden thread waiting in the darkness for her to finally see it, to finally be strong enough to hold it. "You feel it," Trent's voice filled her mind, rough with emotion she could taste. "You can feel me." "I feel everything," she sent back, and it was true. The bond thrummed between them, alive and electric. The rogues were backing away now, fear replacing their greed. "You can't win," the woman said, but her voice now trembled. "There are too many of us." "Leave." Talia's wolf stood tall, power still crackling around her. "Leave, and tell whoever sent you that the Dreamweaver belongs to no one. Tell them I'm under the Alpha King's protection. Tell them if they come for me again, they'll face both of us." "This isn't over," she hissed back. The woman held her gaze for a long moment, then jerked her head at her rogues. They retreated into the forest, their eyes wary, leaving the dead behind. Silence fell over the clearing. Talia's wolf turned to Trent, and the bond between them hummed with emotion. He shifted back to human, and she'd never seen anything more beautiful than the way he looked at her, like she was a miracle, like he'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. "Talia," he whispered, and her name had never sounded like that before, like a prayer. She shifted back, and for the first time, it was effortless. Her wolf released her gently, lovingly, and then Talia stood on human legs in the moonlight, her skin flushed, with power and joy and the overwhelming rightness of finally being whole. Trent moved before she could speak, shrugging out of his torn shirt. His hands were gentle as he draped it over her shoulders, his fingers lingering at her collar. The touch sent sparks racing across her skin. Then his arms came around her, and she melted into him. He held her like she was something precious and fragile and utterly irreplaceable, like he'd been terrified of losing her and still couldn't quite believe she was real. His heart thundered against her cheek, his breath warm in her hair. "You did it," he murmured against her temple. "You were magnificent." Talia's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on just as tightly. She tilted her head back to look at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. "When?" she asked softly. "When did you know?" Trent's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "The first night, 3 weeks ago." His voice was rough. "My scouts reported strange magic in the Black Pine. I came to investigate, expecting a threat. Instead, I found you sitting in this clearing, crying." Talia's chest tightened. She remembered that night, remembered feeling so utterly alone. "You were whispering to the trees," he continued, his eyes distant with memory, "asking them what was wrong with you. And then you called moonlight to your palms, just pulled it out of the air like it was nothing, and scattered it like you were freeing something captive." His gaze refocused on her, intense. "You laughed. Even crying, even hurting, you still found wonder in it. Did you feel the bond then?" "Yes, my wolf knew immediately." The word was barely audible. "Threw himself against my ribs so hard I nearly shifted right there. I'd never—" He stopped, shook his head. "Never what?" His jaw tightened. "I've been alive for 33 years, Talia. I've met thousands of wolves. I've had people throw their daughters at me, had council members parade unmated wolves in front of me for a decade." His eyes held hers. "I never felt even a flicker of what I felt the moment I saw you. Not once, not even close." Her heart stuttered. "I wish you approached me." Pain flickered across his face. "Me too. But you looked so free, Talia. Wild and hurt and beautiful, yes, but free in a way I'd never seen you anywhere else." His thumb brushed her lower lip, and she felt the touch echo through the bond. "So you just watched. I protected you. I learned you." His voice dropped. "I learned that you talk to the oak tree like it's an old friend, that you hum when you think no one can hear, that you touch the moss like you're saying hello." His forehead dropped to hers. "I learned that you're stronger than you believe, and gentler than you should be in a world this cruel." Talia's breath shuddered. "That sounds like more than protection." It was. His admission was raw. "By the 5th night, I was gone. By the 10th, I would have killed anyone who looked at you wrong. By 19, he pulled back just enough to look at her. By the 19th night, I was terrified, because I'd fallen in love with someone who didn't know I existed, and I had no idea how to tell you without destroying the thing I loved most about you, which was that you belonged to yourself." His hand slid into her hair. "Not your pack's failed project, not your family's disappointment, not some alpha's prize. In that clearing, you were just you, free to be imperfect and powerful and everything in between." His voice dropped. "Even now, even with the bond, I need you to know. This doesn't chain you to me. You don't owe me anything because fate decided we're mates. If you want time, if you want space." She kissed him then, because words weren't enough, because the bond sang between them, because she'd spent 4 years believing she'd never have this, And here it was. Here he was. Trent kissed her back like she was air, and he was drowning, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. His hands tangled in her hair, and Talia melted into him, into the safety of his arms, into the certainty of the bond. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Trent rested his forehead against hers again. "We should go," he said reluctantly. "They'll come back, stronger next time. Let them." Talia felt different, felt powerful in a way that had nothing to do with magic. "I'm not running anymore." "No, you're not." Pride shone in his eyes. "But we need allies, a plan. Your power is still raw, untrained. We need to find records of the Dreamweavers, learn what you can do, how to control it." "Will there be records?" "My library has texts dating back 300 years. If there's information anywhere, it'll be there." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Come home with me, to my territory. Let me protect you while we figure this out." Home. The word made her chest ache with recognition. "What about my family?" "We'll send word. Let them know you're safe." He paused. "They'll understand. Eventually." Talia thought about her parents, about Irina, about the life she'd lived in shame and fear. She couldn't go back to that. Couldn't pretend to be small anymore. "Okay," she said. "Take me home." Trent's smile was like sunrise. "It'll be dangerous. The rogues will keep coming. Other wolves will want to control you, use your power. It won't be easy." "Nothing about me has ever been easy." She grinned, feeling wild and powerful. "Why start now?" He laughed, the sound genuine and warm, and pulled her close again. Above them, the moon watched as the Alpha King and his Dreamweaver mate stood together in the clearing where he'd once watched over her, where she'd cried herself to sleep believing she was alone. She wasn't alone anymore. And she was done being afraid. Later that night, Talia stood at the window of Trent's private chambers, wrapped in one of his shirts, watching moonlight dance, over the forests. Behind her, she heard him moving through the room, the quiet sounds of someone comfortable in their own space, no longer performing for courts or councils. She felt him approach before his arms slid around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His chin rested on her shoulder, and through the bond, she felt his contentment, his peace. "What are you thinking?" he murmured against her neck. "That only yesterday, I was alone in the black pine, convinced I'd always be alone." Her hands covered his where they rested against her stomach. "And now I'm here, with you, and I can feel you even when you're not touching me." She turned in his arms, sliding her hands up his bare chest to rest against his shoulders. "It's overwhelming, in the best way." Trent's gaze was intense, tender. "You'll never be alone again. Even when I'm across the territory, even when we're apart." He pressed his hand over her heart. "I'll be right here. Always." She believed him. More than that, she felt the truth of it through the bond. "Show me," she whispered, and watched his eyes darken with understanding. He lifted her easily, carrying her toward the bed, and Talia wrapped her arms around his neck, marveling at how safe she felt, how wanted, how utterly, completely seen. When he laid her down on silk sheets, moonlight painted them both in silver. He braced himself above her, one hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "I've imagined this," he admitted roughly. 19 nights of watching you sleep, wanting to touch you, wanting—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Wanting what?" She traced the line of his jaw, feeling powerful in an entirely different way. "Everything." His thumb brushed her lower lip. "I wanted everything with you." "Then take it," she breathed. I'm not running anymore. The kiss was different this time, deeper, hungrier, full of weeks of restraint finally breaking. His hands mapped her body like he was memorizing her, and Talia arched into his touch, into the certainty of being wanted exactly as she was. Through the bond, she felt his reverence, his desire, his love, building like a storm, and she sent back her own emotions, her trust, her wonder, the fierce joy of finally being whole. They came together like the moon finding the sun after an eclipse, inevitable, necessary, right. And when Talia cried out his name, it wasn't from pain or fear or shame. It was from finally being home. Hours later, she lay in his arms, tracing lazy patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. The room was quiet except for their breathing, the crackle of the fire, the sound of two hearts beating in sync. Talia? His voice was drowsy, satisfied. Thank you. She lifted her head to look at him. For what? For being brave enough to let me love you. His hand cupped her face. For choosing this. Choosing us. The archives had a record, he murmured now, his fingers threading through her hair. From before the purges. Alpha lines and wild magic used to bond all the time. It made packs stronger, not weaker. The ban came later, political. His hand found hers, laced their fingers together. The old laws are clear. A true mate bond supersedes bloodline politics. So we're legal? She couldn't help the small laugh. On a technicality? On a truth they tried to bury. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were good tears. Happy tears. Thank you for watching over me, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Always. For as long as we live. And Talia believed him, because she wasn't alone in the forest anymore, crying herself to sleep while believing no one cared. She was wrapped in the arms of a man who'd killed for her, protected her, loved her even when she couldn't love herself. She was home, and she was finally, beautifully free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.